Today we're talking about Varl the Destroyer. Hey, welcome, I'm LeilaFox. Today's video is the lore story for Varl the Destroyer. Varl is a brand new legendary orc champ that was recently introduced into Raid Shadow Legends, and he's only available in the Hard Doom Tower. Meaning, again, you have to collect his fragments and be able to summon him. When we look at his design in the game, I have to say, I feel like he fits the Orc faction war perfectly. Just with the massive glaives that he has, the skulls that are on his armor, and just the way that his appearance is, he absolutely fits what we have known to like and what we know to see from the Orc faction. And his skills are pretty good too. His A1 heals him by percent of the damage inflicted. His A2 is an AoE weaken along with a decreased attack. A3 is he ignores target's defense and decreases max HP by 50% of damage inflicted, and does a block damage on himself if his attack kills an enemy. And his passive is called Mass Murder, increases this champion's attack by 10% each time they use an active skill, which stacks up to 100%, and it resets each round. So as far as his skills and his look goes, it feels like something we would expect from the orcs, especially with the name Varl the Destroyer, and they give his passive something worded Mass Murder. Now, how is this story gonna measure up with the rest of the orc faction? Let's take a look at their lore. Orcish tribes maintain a tenuous hold in pockets from Durham Forest to the Deadlands. Initially bred as warrior slaves, orcs do what they must to ensure their survival and will pick off unwitting travelers for their coin, blood, and bones. Fearful of persecution by the men of Karok, they have sided with the Queen of Arabia. So let's get into the lore story for Varl the Destroyer from the Tolarian Lore Book of Champions. Renowned for their ferocity, the orc tribes that make their home in the lands surrounding Felwyn Gates have long established themselves as a force to be reckoned with. They often roam the trade routes and plains as brigands, or fight as mercenaries for those who can afford their services. Such was Varl, the leader of a vicious band of sellswords, whose infamy grew with every village he had put to the torch. His authority over the ragtag force of Galimpact warriors seemed unshakable until the day an enigmatic Gnarlhorn shaman arrived and roused the skinwalkers under Varl's command to mutiny. They abandoned their posts and made it north into the lands of Arabia. Enraged by this news, Varl turned the entire band and pursued the deserters with ruthless determination. The two forces clashed, and many skinwalkers fell in that skirmish. Yet the shaman escaped further north with a handful of his followers. Varl followed the trail like a ravenous wolf, hell-bent on meting out vengeance for the insult he had suffered. He eventually overtook the traders in an ancient grove somewhere in the southernmost reaches of High Elven lands and fell upon them, assured of a swift victory. However, the shaman had already found what he wanted, an ancient artifact that lay hidden at the heart of the grove. He conducted a terrible ritual in the name of Siroth and imbued his fighters with the power of darkness. A battle ensued, hard and bloody. Though the skinwalkers were outnumbered, their unnatural resilience and strength tipped the scales. Varl realized that his orcs were losing heart and would soon flee the field. Not one to simply accept defeat, he ordered to set the trees ablaze in hopes of taking his foes with him. That gambit saved Varl's life, for the source of the shaman's power perished in flames, and the tide of the battle turned once more. Orc mercenaries surged forth and hurled the skinwalkers into the raging inferno, while Varl himself slew the shaman in single combat and claimed his skull as a trophy. Victorious but gravely wounded, the chieftain ordered his remaining forces to retreat. Alas, fate had one last cruel joke to play at Varl's expense. A host of high elves of Arabia fell on his trail, summoned to investigate the battle that left the sacred grove of Lamea in ashes. To them, Varl was a brutish savage responsible for that sacrilege. Negotiations were not an option, and the orcs had no strength to resist. Salvation came unbidden. A flame-haired woman known as the Arbiter intervened, offering Varl a chance to save his kinsmen and atone for his crimes. Rather than perish by blade or arrow, he would become an immortal guardian of the Doom Tower, a prison the Arbiter had built for Talaire's most dangerous monsters. It was a grim duty that Varl accepted, but it was his only chance to redeem himself. Perhaps one day, a hero will come and vanquish the evil of the Doom Tower forever. Until then, Varl the Destroyer stands guard, as he had for centuries. Wow, I have to say, this story I think really does fit the orc faction really well. One of the last things we had read about the orc faction as a whole is it said that they do what they can for survival. And we definitely see that when it comes to the story for Varl. It says that he's a known leader of orcish tribes, and his infamy grew with the more villages that they overtook. And what I do find interesting about his story too is that they included the Gallon Pact. So we know the Gallon Pact to be Ogren, Lizard, Skinwalker, and Orc, but in this story in particular, they only talk about orcs and skinwalkers, and how there was a little bit of a falling out, and him being the leader of the orcs, he wasn't having that. They fought with the skinwalkers, and through a brutish battle, they were able to win. But the story doesn't stop there. Then we have the entrance of the High Elves. And while some people might read this and see it as the High Elves came over, they saw that Varl destroyed their sacred forest and weren't even going to let him explain or talk about anything that had happened between him and the Skinwalkers. A lot of times in these kind of stories, these groves, these forests, they're sacred, they're holy. This becomes part of their creed because it seems like it's part of their faction, that it's sacrilege. Something was destroyed that was holy to them, and they easily would have just probably killed off all of the orcs if it wasn't for the Arbiter. The Arbiter, she is such an interesting character in and of herself because she does appear in many of these different lore stories, and oftentimes she shows up as a mode of redemption, which is what we see here. Varl, him and his company were weak. Himself and the orcs, they most likely would have died. But here comes Arbiter offering a mode of salvation. Now, what is this salvation? You know, it's debatable whether this is really good or not. She offers him to go and be a guardian in the Doom Tower, and he decides to take it to atone for what he did, but also to save his orc brethren. I have to say, I thought overall this was a good story. It was a bit brutal when it talks about what had happened between the orcs and the skinwalkers, but again, I do think it fits in with the orc faction really well. And again, you have to love seeing that entrance of Arbiter and at least an explanation of how Varl the Destroyer ends up in the Doom Tower, because my guess would be, with us knowing what the Doom Tower is, that these champions that are in these fragments most likely did not go of their own volition. I would love to know what you guys think of the story for Varl the Destroyer. Leave me some comments down below. What did you think? Do you think that this fits the orc faction war lore stories? Was this the kind of story you were expecting? Let me know what you think in the comments. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, check out some more videos up here in the playlist on the top right.